Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you may be. I'm Stan Goldstein with Kate Boylston Publications. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the webinar, How to Maximize Your Business Value Now and for the Future, presented by the Johnson Consulting Group. Today, we're happy to be joined by Jake Johnson, the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Johnson Consulting Group, as he discusses how crucial it is to maximize your enterprise value if you are ready to transfer your funeral business. Please submit your questions throughout the webinar, and Jake will take them through the webinar. And so, Jake, please take it away.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for joining this webinar. These are interesting times, to say the least. And I think during them, it's always, we never want to lose sight of where our company is, where we are, and where we fit within our company, and how we're contributing, and what the end goal is, as I always say, keeping the end in mind, which is another comment I'll make during this presentation. But today I want to talk about how things like succession planning, strategic planning, what we call four-legged stool view and approach to your business, and how those things affect the value of your business. I'm going to look at case studies and share you a little update on what we see in the profession today as it relates to value. And we're a statistics company as well, so we've got a lot of data. So I'll also share with you just some benchmarks and statistics we've seen during this COVID crisis as well, which I think you might find interesting. So why don't I get started with that? And as mentioned, as you have questions, submit them, and we'll try to make this interactive and answer as many questions as I can during the time that we have together today. So just a quick blurb about Johnson Consulting. We've been around since 1997. There's 42 employees. We've closed over $2 billion in transactions. And at any given time in our M&A division, we have roughly 100 clients engaging us either with valuations or selling or buying, loan requests, things of that nature. So we remain quite busy and during these times, which I'll get into as well. And we do that through what we call the business life cycle of services, through valuation to then buying or selling, getting a loan, accounting, management consulting or business consulting, surveying those customers and monitoring the sales, and then the wheel keeps turning. So the first question when I bring these questions up during this presentation, keep them in the frame of how these things are impacting your value. And that's why I bring them up, because the succession planning, I could do an entire presentation just on succession planning. So the key points I'll bring up here are how they impact your business in particular. So the question is, do you have a succession plan? Do you know what that means? It can mean a lot of things to different people, but in particular, are you following a strategic plan in your organization? Are you working on job redundancy within your organization? If you get hit by a bus or your key manager gets hit by a bus, what happens? Does everything fall apart? That's not uncommon that it could, or it does. And these things, again, keep these questions in mind as they impact the value of your business. So,
hey Jake, I'm sorry, this is Stan. We're seeing your notes on the side of the screen, so I don't know if you can just put the one slide. Maybe
you're seeing the notes on the side of the screen?
Yeah, your next slide on the right. So
let me try this. I'm going to turn one monitor off.
Okay.
See if that fixes it. It's not.
That's what we want right there. That's what.
Are you seeing just the one slide? Okay, thank you. Perfect.
Yes, we're seeing the one slide. So yeah, sorry to interrupt.
Perfect.
But yeah, we're getting some comments on that. We were okay.
I'm glad that you had that. So that you mentioned that. Thank you. Let me move these things around here. Okay, so I've mentioned following a strategic plan, working on job redundancy. So keeping in mind that great funeral directors may not make great arrangers, and great arrangers don't make great managers, and great managers don't make great owners. And so are you addressing those issues of capabilities if you see a great funeral director that you may want to have in that succession, or that would maintain the professionalism and how the operation runs if you were ever to transfer it to an outside party that's interested in who's going to run it for you. If you don't have those people around, that can impact, and does and can impact value of your business depending on who you're selling to. So, I like to frame it up as, are you working yourself out of a job? So if you are, keeping in mind what components are those that you as the owner should be responsible for, And I like to even use the comment that if you consider yourself a person that's paid $1,000 an hour, what are those tasks you should be doing to be paying somebody that much money, and what are the jobs that you shouldn't be doing? And I bet you could all list them, and I probably could myself, of those things that probably need to be given to somebody else. And those things trickle down, and believe me, when it comes time to value the business, or you're looking for areas in which to maximize your value, that need to be addressed. So another way that I frame this is starting with the end in mind, and I mentioned that at the beginning of this presentation. So if it's 1 year out, what does that mean? If it's 5 years out, 10 years out, obviously the more time that you have, the more time available to prepare yourself. However, if you've done a good job of preparing yourself and you can answer yes to all the questions and comments I'm about to make, then maybe 1 year out works for you. But the question would be, asking yourself, what kind of shelf life does your business have? How do you want to retire? Do you still want to work part-time? Are you going to move out of town? All of the things in this wheel impact the value of your business, positive and negative. So can there be differences in values? Absolutely, there can be. If you're selling to an employee or family member, we call it a two-column approach to kind of show what mom or dad should be getting if they were selling an outside party, and for the son or daughter to see what, or the son and daughter to create a column of what their expenses will be, so mom and dad knows what cash flow they have, different than maybe an outside consolidation company. So, if you're selling your business to an outside party, that's one view. If you're buying a business, you hope to buy it as I don't want to say discounted, but as fairly for you as possible. If you're liquidating the business and selling the real estate separately, if you're selling the business and keeping the real estate, if there's minority share interest, you're selling just a portion of the business, there's discounts associated with that. There's all these different methods, and they all have different potential values for the business. And each of them has their own scenario for analysis. So you want to keep that in mind as you look through this. So what drives success and therefore value? What we've done is we do what we call a performance analysis. And I own a funeral home as well. I've done it on my own funeral home. And it's more of what I refer to as the four-legged stool. So you have the customer service in your organization, the workplace, the marketplace, and your financial management. And I'm going to go through some things to ask in each of these areas so that you can ask yourself, am I doing all these at a high level? Because if you are, they're going to drive value, and you're going to maximize the value of your business. So leg number one of the stool, customer service. That means that you're constantly exceeding the expectations of anyone who comes in contact with your business. All right, so think about that you can say for sure that that's happening. The way we assess that at Johnson Consulting is we do a seamless service survey. We do a service delivery survey, body preparation survey, and operational readiness audit. So in these surveys, we're querying the people within the organization to make sure they understand their part in the process, and how, if they're large enough organization, how that transfers from one to the other, and as well as operational readiness. So do you have all the tools necessary to deliver at a high level? And what's interesting is, as an owner, we know what we know, but sometimes we don't ask these questions, and you do these surveys, and it's interesting what comes up, or that you realize, oh, if I just could make this small tweak, or I didn't realize the staff needed that causes a lot of positive results in better customer service, which then results in that maximizing the value that we're speaking of. So characteristics of success in customer service, that you're establishing it as a company priority and not giving it just lip service. You have customer service training, you're doing family satisfaction surveys, you're measuring performance, and you have timely action to continuous improvement. But I would say within my own organizations, we meet weekly. We talk about customer service that we see not only in our organization and the good and bad, but we also look at the customer service we see outside of our organization, and to make that mindset that we're always thinking about how and what good customer service looks like and what bad customer service looks like. So we make it something that's part of our culture. And if you do too, that will resonate with your customers, it's going to maximize the value of your business for sure. So ask yourself things like this. Do I know what my customers want? Especially nowadays, do we know what our customers want? Do I know what services mean the most to our customers? Do I really know how they feel about our services? Are we exceeding their expectations? And how do you know that? How well do you answer the phone? Are you doing phone shopping? And how effective are your Rangers listening skills? If you believe customer loyalty has changed, which it has, then do you know why your customers choose your business now? If you believe customers know more about prices due to the internet, then do you know how customers feel about your prices? And do Rangers clearly and professionally explain the payment policy, and do your customers recommend your business to others and why? These are things that if you're doing an active customer survey, these are things you're going to find out. These are things you're going to talk about with your staff. And again, these are things that in the end maintain, drive additional value, revenue, and maximize the value of your business. So do all the employees clearly understand what quality customer service is? Like all of them. And how do you have you established clear service expectations, standards of your business? Do you regularly train your employees and how to provide excellent customer service? So these are all things that if you do this as part of your culture, it's going to feed into the next thing, which is workplace, which I want to talk about. So the second part of the stool is workplace, providing your employees with a workplace environment that embraces personal growth and development. I'm a strong believer in this. We all should be, as owners, especially if as our business grows, or God forbid we want to take a day off. We'd love to know that we've got employees that we're all on the same page. They love what they do. They love working in the organization. It's not about you. It's about the organization. It's a living, breathing thing, as I say, and how that workplace is set up. That resonates when people look at your business, or even a company like mine. When we do the valuation, you can tell that these things are in place, and it impacts value. So workplace, the way we assess a workplace to see just how high it's performing is we do owner interviews, senior management team interviews, manager interviews. We're interviewing everybody. We have a survey that we do for managers, employee satisfaction surveys, employee interviews, organizational structure and workflow analysis, a lot of tools and things to look at with the organization. One thing I'll mention as I'm going through this presentation is these slides at the end of the presentation. If you need these slides, all you got to do is email us, and we'll send you these slides so you can review these in a little more detail, and happy to answer any further questions as well, and certainly during this presentation. So high-performing workplaces that we see impacts value. They are conducting regular staff meetings. They have employee training occurring. They've got a clear chain of command in the organizational chart. Everybody knows who they report to and who they ask questions to. There's effective job descriptions. There's individual performance reviews occurring on a regular basis. There's a good employee recognition. And the last one is always be interviewing. And as an owner, this is where to me, you're looking not only within the organization and that job redundancy and who could be maybe the next person to move up, but also outside the organization and those high performers that may be available to take your business to the next level, which ultimately, again, results in improved value. So ask yourself these questions on the workplace. How is your employee morale? Do you experience employee turnover? And keeping in mind that no turnover can be just as bad as a lot of turnover. So, that's easy for me to say in a profession where it's hard to find people in your workplace, but it is something to look at. So how do I communicate with my employees? Do I have regular staff meetings? Does everybody understand their roles and responsibilities? Does everyone know who they report to? Do I provide training, recognize a job well done? We could all do better as that as owners. Is our compensation competitive? Do I have incentive programs in place? Do I have a regular individual performance review with all my staff members? I'll go back to the compensation, competitive, and incentive programs. These are things that when we value companies where they have good competitive compensation and or possibly incentive programs in place, it's a nice warm blanket when you're an outside person looking in an organization to know that these people are compensated well, and that you're not walking into something where everybody's going to, now that the owner's gone, it's now free time to speak and say, we're all underpaid. And that impacts value. So, make sure that those two are addressed in particular. So the third leg of that stool is marketplace, and that means actively contributing to the marketplace that you serve. And the questions and analysis that we would do to look at this, so that you can do as well, is historical case count analysis, market share trend analysis in your market. Some states are easier or harder to do stuff like that than market share analysis. Marketplace price comparison. Phone shopping, of course, I mentioned that before. A SWOT analysis, your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and then competitive intelligence. These are important things to do, and don't, for the love of God, unless you just don't have enough time and you have to just guess, don't guess at this stuff. Really do an analysis of this stuff and understand where you are. It's the intelligence is out there and easy to get. When it comes to pricing, you walk in and get the pricing from your competitors. You really give yourself a fair SWOT analysis, not only of yourself but your competition, and find out where the opportunities are. And one thing that we like to say when we do our strategic plan is, how can we put ourselves out of business? And I think you should ask yourselves that as well. And if there's some answers that you don't like out of that, then how are you addressing it? So, as I mentioned, ask yourself things like your strengths and weaknesses, your opportunities and threats. What are the opportunities in the marketplace? What are your competitors' strengths and weaknesses? And do you know your position in the marketplace? Your high price, low price, value price, carriage trade? Are you guessing? Is that your feel, or do you know for sure? Do you have employees who clearly understand their role in community relations? I think if we're all in it together, and we ought to have their ambassadors as well as yourself out in the community, and we've learned how that can impact us through social media accounts and Facebook and things like that, but it's something to pay attention to. Are you impacted by discounters? How are you addressing that? Do you consider the internet part of your marketplace competition? I assume you would, and how are you addressing that? And do you have the last one being real important, do you have a formal, written, and detailed annual marketing plan? Do you know what you're going to do at your business on a monthly basis? And what are all the marketing channels you could possibly spend that money doing, and how much money are you going to dedicate to spending, or are you just winging it? I'll admit that you can, in our profession, get away with winging it a little, but I also will tell you that if you're interested in maximizing your value, having a formal marketing plan and knowing what you're going to do on a monthly basis and sharing that with your staff is going to be key, and it's going to maximize your value. So the last part of this stool is the financial management. Certainly that you would have the best financial management processes occurring at your business. And the analysis you do to assess that would be a comparative financial statement analysis, looking at multiple years, sales contract analysis. I've done my share of those in the past. Expense analysis, payroll analysis, accounts receivable analysis. How long is it taking to collect your money? The merchandise plan evaluation that we'll look at, and collections and accounts receivable survey, and what the process is for collecting money and or asking for it up front. These are all things that if they make your head spin, I can tell you some of the most high performing businesses we've sold, they have these things that they've done, addressed in the past, or currently in process of, and it showed in the value they got when they transferred their business to either a key employee or to an outside company. So financial management includes an operating budget. I assume everybody's got a budget. You should. Benchmarks, the understanding where you lie as far as what your percentage of payroll, for instance, is of net sales. What are your non-operational expenses that are in there, and then debt service, and how are you how close are you to servicing the debt to the cash flow that you have? They like to call it sometimes a fixed charge coverage ratio, and it's a good measure to find out just how healthy your firm is. For a benefit of this presentation, I'll tell you that it's either 135% or 1.35 times, which means that your ending cash at the end of the day, at the end of the year, or the end of the month is 135% of your debt payments that you have for that month. It means you got 35% spread. It's just a healthy indication of how the business is operating, and it's a mindful thing to look at as you figure out what you're going to do in the year in your operating budget. All these things, when we see these in organizations that do this on a regular basis, they're high performing and high valued firms. Characteristics, you know your precise business mix. You effectively merchandise your products and services. You are active in measuring your individual range or sales performance. You practice variable expense management. You collect your money, and the result is that you're optimizing your cash flow. Things to ask yourself: am I getting timely, accurate, and useful financial information? Do I prepare a comprehensive yearly budget? Do I know my business mix, and do I actually forecast this mix? Do I know my pre-need to at-need ratio? Do I understand how to establish sales targets? And do I know my controllable sales averages? There's a lot of information in this that I'm sharing in all these slides before. When you break it down and start off and tackle these things one at a time, you'll get there. And it's rewarding, but in so many ways, certainly in how it reflects on the staff and the performance of the organization and how it reflects in the community. But again, for the purposes of what I want to explain today, it does impact the value of your business. So do I know the percentage cremation families that have chosen us to conduct additional services? Do I know the, and then for instance, direct cremations versus full service cremations? Do I understand my individual profit centers? I've got a case study on how individual arrangers affect the value of your business that I'm going to show you. Do my current service and merchandise pricing produce the financial results I need? Do my arrangers professionally ask for and receive payment at time of arrangements? That's the receivables questions. Do I manage our AR to today's standards, and do I maximize cash flow? So all of these things to ask yourself. If you're saying yes to all of these, well, then I know where I can say the value of your business is lying. But at the same time, is that your belief? Are you sharing that as a consensus? How are you assessing it? Are you running through a systematic approach to really understand how these things compare to benchmarks out in the profession? So obviously the bottom line being, if all the legs are holding up the seat, then if they're not holding up the seat, you're going to fall over. This impacts value. So, all four of these things are important. We call it the performance analysis, and they do drive and maximize the value of any business that we've ever been involved with, seen, or helped. So the next step that I want to show you is a value matrix that we created here to show our analysts, as they do the financial side of looking at funeral business, there's those non-financial sides that, if you will, take that multiple that we all hear about as far as valuing businesses, and it can move that multiple higher or lower. And so, again, these slides I'm happy to share with you if you email us, and I want to share with you these things that we've seen that impact value from a non-financial standpoint, is what I'll say. So you've got, if you answer yes to all these, things are looking good for you. You've got a good call volume trend, and perhaps you're even a large volume firm. Call volume trend is important though. The business is running well without you. Employees are not at risk of starting their own business. They love where they work. You're compensating them well. You'll see kind of the tie-in of these comments with this four-legged stool that I mentioned earlier. You're the franchise name in the market. You compete well against good competition. And you have good future for there's a good future for the market and the community. You have strong revenues with consistent average sale. You have good succession in place at your business. You have a good location where your property is. You're in the good path of progress in your community. You have good functionality at your location. The demographics support your business concept or the business that you have, and that your personnel mix, age and experience. So I mention that, meaning that if I go into value of business and the owner is 75, 80 years old, and the staff is 75, 80 years old, this is not going to bode well on, and when we do the valuation, the concern will then be, is everybody retiring? And there's going to be no staff left. So, how are you keeping that bullpen, if you will, in baseball terms, stocked with good people and look at, that are ready to step in, and that redundancy that I talked about in the past. It's just a great way to easily see how values are maximized at businesses. Now, it's not to say that you have a company like us that comes in and can address these things and shed those things in a good light, but the more of these things that are addressed, the more you're going to maximize value on top of a good marketing approach and how you introduce buyers to the information that you have. So bottom line for value, how does the life expectancy look for your business? Obviously, if it looks good, your value should be good. If you don't think the life expectancy of your business looks good, then we need to talk. We need to talk, and you need to reflect within and say, can I get it to where it looks good, or do I need to exit, quite frankly? Hire a professional and maximize the value for your business when you're ready. Don't risk anything when it comes to this stuff. And keeping in mind the most important thing to remember, and it's sobering, but the fact is you will get the most money and maximize the most value for your business during a time when you don't need to sell your business or even think about transferring it. So it's kind of one of those things I equate to all of us thinking we're going to live forever, and then the day finally comes, and then, how well did we prepare for that day? So, the fact is, you start with the end in mind, and when I mean the end in mind, like start with might not even be far enough to start with. You're retired and you're here, and you have this much of income on an annual basis, so that you can enjoy the rest of your life. And then start working backwards and figure out how you're going to get there with where you are today and owning your business. Because you might find that maybe you can get where that end is during a time where you didn't think you needed to sell, but you maximize the value instead of trying to sell where buyers look at the opportunity of your business, about either buyers within your business or outside, and they see that the future doesn't look so bright. And so, get ahead of that before it impacts the value of your business. So, case studies.
And
yes,
Jake, we do have one question that came in. What constitutes a large volume firm?
It depends on the market. I think that there's attractive businesses that are 110 calls in smaller markets, but I would say depending on average sale as well. So, my funeral home's a 400 call funeral home, but the average sale's a little low, so we're just over $1 million in sales. So, I've seen very attractive businesses at 100 calls and higher, and we've sold businesses that had as much as 6,000 calls. So it's really it's a dependent type of thing, and that's not the best answer. But I think depending on your market, depending on your average sale, that call volume can vary from what I'd consider a large volume business. So the question might go back to saying, is it West Coast, East Coast? West Coast might require a little higher volume, but I've seen, as I said, fantastic firms that do 100, 110 calls. As a matter of fact, my family has a funeral home in Batesville, Indiana. I'm not sure that we do even 100 funerals, but it's a fantastic funeral home. So hopefully that answers the question or gives some idea.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for the questions, and keep them coming. If you guys got any, I'm happy to stop and answer them. So this case studies, these slides always kind of will get people, and these might be the slides if any of you are looking for slides that you might actually want. So these really drive home a point about how your average sale increase or decrease, your case count increase or decrease, and how your arrangers of train impacts the value of your business. I could almost do one presentation just on these slides I'm about to show you. So let's get into them. So first of all, let's talk about when somebody says I have a 500 call funeral home, what's my value worth? I think we need, if you want to unpeel that a little more, let's talk about the following examples. So you got three businesses, going from 2015 to 2019, and business one, 450, 510, 500, 495, 500, and you look at the other businesses, business two kind of looks like it's losing volume, and business three looks like it's growing volume. But if you're in 2019 and you come to me and say, look, how much is my business worth? I've got a 500 call firm. I'm going to look at business one and say it's probably the more valuable firm. Business three, maybe, but we don't know in 2019, since value is based on trend review, whether or not that's a high year or next year is going to be 550 calls. It's just hard to say. So, when you dig in to look at businesses to buy, or you're considering your own value, the point of this slide is trends. Have a good trend. Business three is obviously a good trend, but it's not stopping growing. Do you want to stop and try to get that value on your 2019 year, or is it going to keep going and you want to kind of see where it levels out? That might be the better strategy there. So again, keeping the end in mind with this. So let's talk about scenario two. So calls and their impact on value. So I'm going to use a firm that has an average sale of $4,500. It's a 500 call firm. So we got $2,250,000 in revenue. I'm going to use a cost of goods percentage of 22%. And I'm going to use this EBITDA number we talk about. This is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization of 30%. So we've got cash that's available for determining a value of $675,000. All right. Again, all these slides I can share with you after the presentation. So we'll use a 6-time multiple on this, and let's assume the value of this business is $4 million. So let's say you take that four-legged stool presentation to heart. You go in there, you really drive some improved culture. And when I say improved culture, not to mean that your culture was bad, you're just even improving it on top of that. You're enhancing your culture. You're delivering even higher customer service. You're holding everybody accountable, issuing those surveys out. You're really following them. You're looking at how people are finding you. You're in your marketplace, looking at price matrix and figuring out what customers want. And you've got good budgeting to stay on top of how to impact your controllable average sales. And ultimately, you gain 10 more calls. So, and we can prove that on that trend. So you need a trend analysis. So you need time to be able to prove this, which is why it's never too early to start. So if you consider what that does on 10 more calls, you add $210,000 more in value to your business. And this is real. You don't think about it this way because we do our job every day and we don't look at this, but it happens. And where it really becomes real for you is when you call me and you say you want a valuation and you realize if you could have just done some of those other things based on the trend review that I have to do to prove what your value is, that you really didn't get credit for all that stuff you did because you didn't start soon enough or you didn't do it at all. So, $210,000, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't mind having $210,000. That's, it's nice. But to really make the message send more clear to home, I think you could almost frame this presentation I'm doing as not only maximizing the value of your business, but maintaining the value of your business. As we face rising cremation, the impacts of COVID perhaps, or just changing consumer habits, wouldn't it be valuable just to know and for a buyer to feel comfortable, either internal or external, that you're not going to lose, 10 more calls, or you're not going to lose average sale? And I'll show you what that impacts. So, but we got to look at it because it's for drama, if you will. So if you lost 10 calls, you lost that same value. If you lost 20 calls, you lost that much. If you lost 30 calls, you lost 630,000. So these are real. You'll never know it when you come to me because it's already happened, most likely. And the sooner you start working on this stuff, the more you either don't lose the 210 or these other numbers, or hopefully you maximize it and grow, and maybe you gain 30 calls and you gain 630,000 value if this is a business indicative of yours and its traits of average sale. So let's talk about average sale though. Let's talk about doing all those four-legged stool things again, and you were able to grow $100 more value on your calls. Maybe it was as simple as just doing a ranger training. And you take that $100 more, add it to those 500 calls, you got 50,000 in revenues. Assuming you were doing it all through service, unless maybe some of it was merchandise, it'd be minimal merchandise cost, but let's do the best outcome, and that you had no additional costs. It all fell to the bottom line. And with $100 more average sale on a 500 call firm, you've added 300,000 in value, which is real. And no presentation would go without a little more drama saying if you lost $100 in average sale, some of us faced during this COVID crisis, or let's say you lost $150 in average sale, or let's say you lost $200 in average sale on this 500 call firm. These are real. And this happens. The only thing that could save you from these is if the trend said it was as such as COVID, that you hope to say that, hey, look, this is a brief instance, and that the average sale is more in this trend, and that's why I hire people like me to do that. You do more of that trend build up and show what you build the story, if you will. So, but these things can be real if you don't frame it correctly, especially when you're presenting your business for the next generation. So, maximizing value, these 2 points in case count and average sale couldn't prove a bigger point. So, I do want to talk about a ranger impact on business, and I know I'm going through this quick, but I want to get to some of these points. So, let's talk about a 300 call firm with a $4,500 average. And you've got these two arrangers, and kind of stare at this for a second. You've got arranger one, obviously $600 average sale higher. Let's say they're both handling the same number of calls for the instance of an apples to apples comparison. When you look at the revenues and then the ultimate impact on value, that discrepancy of 160 or 158,000, whatever that comes to, I mean, that's an interesting scenario. And as I stare at this more, I can't help but wonder, let's say both of these arrangers at your business, some of you are going to smile when I say this, both of these arrangers at your business, and arranger number 2 happens to be Harry, who's been there longer and actually gets paid more, and he just got his way of doing things. So Harry's impacting your business by $158,000 because it's been okay for him to have a lower average sale. So I'll even stop there for a second and let that sink in for you, because it's happening. I can tell you right now, in every organization, including mine, I've got great people who work in my organization, but they all have different presentations that they do and result in average sales. So when I stare at this, I say, wow, what is the importance of arranger training and getting together, talking about customer service and how that impacts the value of my business. It's a real thing. And these are those individual profit centers that I'm talking about within your organization and how they're impacting the value of this business. Arranger 1 is literally adding, this person is responsible for almost $1.3 million in value of your business, of your money, and $1 million, and then $1.134 million for Arranger 2. So it's a real telling and real thing that's occurring in all of our organizations. And so the arranger discrepancies, as I mentioned, are both getting compensated the same. I bet Arranger 2 may even be making more money in one of your organizations. Are they getting training? And again, Arranger A is adding $162,000 more in value. So when we talk about maximizing the value of the business, if you don't want to take anything else from this presentation, just start with the arrangers. And I think you can see just what that can do to maximize the value of your business. So let's talk about what we're seeing now. I want to start first by giving you a little COVID case study that we did at Johnson Consulting. We have a sister company, J3 Tech, that has surveying and sales analysis that we do. And in 2019, we surveyed 190,000 cases, which comprise of $634 million in sales in 2019. And so for the purposes of our COVID study, we did a 315 to 831, 2019 versus 2020. And these are the figures that we see. So it'll be interesting, again, you can get the slide from me after this, write these down if you want, compare them against yourself. But we saw overall average sale down 4.6%, professional services fees average sale down 6%. We did see a call volume increase of 6.8%. Burial decreased 2%, cremation increased 4%, shipping down 1%, other cases increased 3%. All cremation cases, direct cremation cases, increased by 11%. So kind of stare at that, absorb that. I don't know if you've seen that out there anywhere. If this is the first time seeing it, I wanted to share that with you as part of this presentation, and kind of take these percentages and the ups and downs, layer them into the case studies I did for average sale and case count, and see where maybe that impacts the value of your business. I think it's important to look at. Now, we can only hope that since our average customer comes to see us, what they say 2 times in their lifetime, that as opposed to other businesses, that this is a temporary thing, but it certainly has pushed us forward, I think, in a positive way to embrace technology, understand the other ways in which we can deliver these services that we provide while the families are, we're all going through this, and the social distancing that needs to occur. So anyway, I wanted to present that slide to you. But the other thing you'd expect to hear from us is what's going on in the mergers and acquisition world in the funeral profession. So I can tell you from what we see, the lending seems to be where it's been. It's out there, it's available for buying. There's equity people, there's venture capitalist people that want to be in our space because it's certainly during these times, it's certainly a more stable profession than others. The number of buyers out there has been no less. In fact, I'd say it's more, depending on the business that's available. I would say that the buyers are being more selective, as they have been as we came out of 2000 into 2006 and 7, when the buyer activity started increasing again. They were being more selective. They still are. And then I would say, as a result of all that, as you can imagine, current valuations compared to past, I mean, they're still there. I think when we first went through the COVID crisis, there was some pullback naturally as people wanted to see where they're ending up, but we're seeing good value for businesses now. So I hope that's encouraging to you to hear that, because it's true. And as I mentioned, we have, at any one time, about 100 clients that we're working with. So what I'd like to do, I wanted to make sure I buzzed through that so that I can answer questions, but I've put some questions myself that I just think you should be asking me because I think they're important to understanding how they impact the value of your business. So I'm going to start my own Q&A, and then I'll look back to you, Stan, and we'll see where to go from there. But as I mentioned, I'm happy to share all these slides, and hope that everybody gets good value out of seeing how to maximize their value. So first one is, I hear this a lot. I have personal expenses in my financials. I need to clean those up first before I sell, don't I? And the answer to me, I always say, is no, you don't have to. You know, if you're coming to me, you're going to get, I'm going to take those out of your financials. I'm going to provide good footnotes, and the buyers are more than agreeable to understanding those as long as they're reasonable, and they typically always are. So you can, we all do it as owners. You can have your personal expenses intertwined within the business, and if it's time to transfer or sell, you can come to us, or you can, recast that information, make good footnotes, and it's something that can be agreeable for buyers to look at as long as it's clear and understandable. So don't let that be the holdup if the time is now to do something or act. The other question I get is, do I need to straighten out some maintenance and repair before I move forward? I always give that as a kind of maybe type of thing, because I always like to look at the fact that if somebody gives me a business to sell, how can I maybe take that to a buyer? How can I take that to the buyer and let the buyer assess what they feel like needs to be done at that business? You might, if you've got OCD like me, and my staff knows that, I might think that everything needs to be polished, chromed, the roof needs to be 1 year old, and that's how I run my business. But you don't know how the buyers do, and the fact is, you can do it because you want to, or you can wait to see what they're going to require if there's any maintenance repair. Certainly if there's a hole in your roof, things like that. But I must admit, I've sold businesses with holes in their roofs and waited for the buyers to come forth and everybody come to agreement on what that number was going to be, rather than spend that time as a seller getting that done and maybe paying more for it than what you could have negotiated through selling your business. So I don't have anybody to run my place if I leave. What do I do? Well, we need to work on that. Depending on who the buyer is going to be, and I use buyer a lot because that's who determines the value of your business. If the buyer is close in the local market, then you don't have anybody to run it, and they're going to absorb the business. Well, maybe that doesn't make a difference. But in general, having somebody to run that business is going to be important if you're not there. And so that's why I go back to that four-legged stool on, workplace and how you're building people within the organization. And I understand that's hard when you have, like our firm in Batesville, Indiana, there's not much of a, if you will, to go to. I mean, we've got great staff there, but it's limited. So, what are the things that I have in place when I'm not there and when the owner's not there? And so the last question I get a lot is, my accountant's way behind on delivering financials. Is that going to be a problem? And I would say typically yes. I mean, again, I can make good work of information I get to build a value in a marketing package, but you want to have good, timely financials. I think if for no other reason, it's think about the reflection it's causing when a buyer or somebody's looking at your business and you're not up to date on the financials and understand your own financial position of your business. So you want to stay on top of those. You want to have good financial practice. That's one of those legged stool, one of the legs on the stool. And if you need guidance on that or just to have questions, I'm happy to answer those as well, after the presentation. But it certainly involves having good accounting practices. You have a good point of sale system that's collecting the data timely, transferring it into your accounting system and what have you, and that it's getting reconciled on a timely basis so that you can make decisions, especially when things aren't so good one month. We all have them where we have ups and downs. And so it's funny how none of this seems to matter when everything's going great for you. And then all of a sudden something changes, and now now we reflect back on all those things we wish we had done already. So, it's never too early to start, but it can be too late to start. So those are some Q&A that I wanted to bring up. So I will hand it back over to you, Stan.
All right. Thank you, Jake. Great questions and answers there. I've got a few questions here. What pushes a multiple from 6 to 7 or 8?
6 or 7 or 8. So you've got, first of all, what's going to drive any market value is going to be multiple buyers looking at your business. basically a highly desirable business, a business that it has a bright future. Some of the higher multiples we've sold, they happen to be cemetery funeral combinations. Cemeteries, good cemeteries, can be hard to find with bright futures, large, lots of excess land and inventory. Those can drive that. But you have what you look for, what we've seen in higher multiples are when you're in a market, you're the premier firm, and there's another firm that's not too bad in your market either, and it's time to sell. Either you're buying them or they're buying you, and the value is just usually a good value if there's enough other competition to where you're not inviting new competition into town. We've seen high values for that. You see high values in areas where it's hard to start a funeral home. Maybe like Los Angeles or New York or Connecticut, or pick some places where the cost of establishing a funeral home, especially a traditional funeral home, due to real estate value, is it's very difficult to do. I've seen very high values for those businesses, but you get good call volume trend, and I'll go back to that large volume thing. Let's say it's a 200-300 call firm in a Midwest town, or in the West Coast or in other markets, maybe it's even 500 or 700 call firm. But I think the caveat is that size firm is competing well against good competition. It's just, you have a good, strong position in your market. You got a good name. Those businesses get nice values. And where I will say this, I have seen high, good volume, high performing businesses that don't have the good redundancy within the staff. I have seen that impact the value, even though they still get high multiples. So a lot of those traits that I mentioned really can sway that value up and down.
Okay, and got a couple comments on your COVID-19 results slide. One asked if you could show it again, and another said they'd like to get a copy of that. So maybe if you could, yeah, that one. And I think you would mention that anyone could email you and you would send them copies of these. But a couple people were interested in seeing that one again.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I mean, that's a part of what all of us should be doing, is giving back to our community. And I think as it relates, I'm a funeral home owner, but as it relates to my consulting company, I think sharing this type of data is powerful for all of us to understand. I mean, how many times do we get a chance to look at 190,000 calls and and see what we're seeing as far as the changes we see? So absolutely happy to share.
Okay. Another question. What is the cost range of a full operational consultancy from you for a 300 call firm?
Yeah, it varies. I think it won't be the answer you're looking for, but we have to dig in and understand looking at the number of locations, I guess I would say, let's say it's one location firm. I think I'll give you a range of costs probably. I mean, if we're talking about a performance analysis, this is something that could range from $10,000 to $20,000, just depending on the complexities and how much we can do over the phone or via computer or in person, what have you. So there is a range, and it can be higher, maybe not too much lower than that. But it's obviously certainly well worth the money when you consider, depending on what your average sale is. If you're growing 2 more calls, 3 more calls, it just pays for itself right there.
Great. All right. And can you speak to a standalone cemetery in a town where there is also a standalone funeral home?
Standalone cemetery. So what would I'm curious what the question would be angled at, but so we got a standalone cemetery in maybe I'll say a small town with a funeral home in town. I think the interesting thing is, and I've managed cemeteries from the operational side of sizes from 180 interments to 1,200. And there's certainly a difference in what goes on a daily basis between those two size cemeteries. But to me, the call volume that makes one cemetery attractive to the other is a little different. You might certainly need a higher call volume, because if you want to look at it from an average sale, typically your average sales are less. But cemeteries are, I like cemeteries. I think they're an attractive way to influence the burial mix within your funeral home. I think you just need to know that they are a different thing. They're a sales organization, and they require good maintenance, ground maintenance oversight. And I've done that, and that's different from the day-to-day functions of running a funeral home. And so if you're up to the challenge for both of those styles of management, I think it can be very rewarding. I've seen businesses do quite well buying the cemetery in their town, or the cemetery in their town buying the funeral home to add to their service offerings.
Okay. Yeah, they follow that up. They said small town value, which I believe you answered. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes back to the beginning of the webinar. You talked about two things: important listening skills and the keys to good customers, or what are the important listening skills and what are the keys to quality customer service?
Right. I think the first thing is active listening, and because assuming everybody's done funeral arrangements that's listening in, I have as well. I mean, there's this objective we have, if you will, that the arrangement starts, and if we're busy, we might have 5 other things that need to be done that day. And so we have so much time with the family, and how do we get through that process while at the same time actively listening and taking them what I would always call through a journey of our service options without sounding like a salesperson. And you're wanting to, people like doing business with people, and they certainly like to trust the people they're doing business with. And so I think early on, just like in meeting anybody, whether it's a funeral arrangement or elsewhere, how are you establishing that bond, that relationship with the individual that you're meeting with? So it's it's a broad answer. There's a lot more meat into that, the answer that I can provide, but the question of customer service certainly involves active listening. We use a measure we like to call Ford within our organization. So this is on getting a little more background on the person that you're meeting with so that you connect with them. And so Ford is, what can you find out about their family? What can you find out about their occupation? What can you find out about the recreations that they enjoy? And can you find out about the dreams they have in life? And when you do those 4 things, you really start connecting with somebody, and it's a valuable thing. And we get that from a presentation we heard in a book that's out there by John DeJulius, and it's all about customer service. And so John DeJulius is based out of Cleveland. We have a customer service program separate of any of this presentation that I've showed you. That it's just a presentation and program on delivering exceptional customer service, and we use the foundation of John DeJulius's customer service program, and he uses things like Ford, but he does this this is no small company. I mean, he does this for companies that we know like Chick-fil-A and Starbucks and what have you, and he's helped us translate into a program for funeral businesses. And so Ford is kind of the one thing I would say as far as connecting with people, certainly listening, and then getting feedback from those customers so that you can continuously improve. And we talk about things about negative cues. What are the things we're doing where we say, you can't do this, you can't do that, no. How are we removing all that and giving the people what they want? While at the same time balancing the time we have with them and the fact that as a funeral professionals and doing a funeral arrangement, for the love of, you don't want to make any mistakes. It's one of those things that mistakes are just not easily forgiven. So there's a good balancing act there. And I think training is a big part of that.
Great. And a final question. You had mentioned about funeral homes knowing their position in the marketplace. Have you found when you've gone to somebody or some of these funeral homes have used your service that they even know where their position is in the marketplace?
They usually have a general idea. The question is what the strategy is. What's your strategy? One of the things back in the day was you want to be in the middle. Do you want to be the low guy? Do you want to be the high guy? Is the middle okay? Maybe, actually. I mean, what do you define yourself as? Do your people in your organization know where you stand in the market and what your objective is, or are you just as so many of us can at times, are you just kind of cruising through this journey, knowing that at the end of the day, you'll do this many calls and there'll be this much money in the bank? So I think when you drill down on it more, find out the firms in your marketplace, where they stand, what their pricing is, how do you differentiate from them? How could you put them out of business? But how could they put you out of business? You start asking these tough questions and do a strategic plan with it. I can tell you this: if I was one of those firms and you were doing all the things I just said you should do, I would be worried about my future, because I know that you're on top of it, and when you find an opening, you're going to exploit it and you're going to grow your business, which is hard to do in funeral service. So.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And did get one more question that just came in. Could you give a couple of examples of metrics used for incentive plans?
Yeah, certainly. State some of the obvious. We got average sale. You've got the customer service metric. Basically, if you're surveying, have you established a benchmark on how high those results should be? Using the surveys that we use, we call it an overall performance satisfaction score out of 1,000, and we've got a scale for what we define as successful operators. Anything I think above 920 out of 1,000 is a pretty well performing individual. Certainly want to look at their collections. I mean, it's all about how are they presenting it, how are they collecting the money, and what do the customers feel about them. So are you surveying, and are you doing a meaningful survey and asking tough questions? Are you assessing the average sale in the mix and the individual average sales of each of the types of cases the arrangers are handling? And then certainly how they're collecting that money. So all being important. And certainly there's also in the firms I managed, as a manager, I took some of the tougher calls. So my arrangers, had more of the traditional families that came in. So I didn't have such a good average. And so there's some things you kind of take and give as it relates to what type of calls they're managing, what's the expectation of that individual be for the overall company's objective, and other scenarios like that. So certainly we want to establish a minimum baseline that the company has to have at least so many calls that period for the number of calls they expect for the year, or there wouldn't be, or it wouldn't kick in, if you will, or that the company needs to have at least an overall satisfaction rating of X, or none of the incentive would kick in. And if those two measures are there, then how do the individual perform on an average sale with their customer scores and how they collected the money? So, and within each of those, you can, for your own business, we customize these things. So you assign different percentages for each of those, depending on what's important to you and driving performance and behaviors out of those individuals. So all of that can be customized and put more heavy weight towards one or the other.
Great. Okay, Jake, any closing remarks you'd like to make?
Well, I think it couldn't say a better thing to see right now during this COVID crisis than for all of us and what we're doing for our individuals, towns, and cities and society. Nobody will disagree with me on this. I don't think they give us enough credit out there and all the hard work we're doing. And, we're the last responders, as they say. And we can be blessed, quite honestly, with where we're at in our position and the business that we do and what we do for our communities. And, these things that I present, I have a software company, and these things I present, these things you have to do from a software translation, or you go out of business. In our field, we're allowed time to, kind of navigate through these a little slower, and we're fortunate for that. But as things like COVID-19 happen, some of that forgiveness or some of that progression speeds up a little, and we need to be on top of it. And so the good news is, there's time, you can do it, and the time's now. So you just get on it, and I know that we'll all get out of this together.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much, Jake Johnson and the Johnson Consulting Group. Very informative webinar. You can visit AmericanFuneralDirector.com and click on the webinar tab to sign up for our future webinars. While you are on our site, please also check out the information on our Cremation Strategies Conference on December 2nd in Nashville, Tennessee, and the Funeral Service Business Plan in December 3rd. That's also in Nashville. Thank you so much for joining us for our webinar, and be sure to keep an eye out for the follow-up email, which will include today's webinar recording. Have a great day, everyone, and thank you again, Jake.
Thank you.